Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Tuesday, May 14th at 10 a.m. and we are here today for a hearing in docket number 2024-61-E and 2024-63-E. These two dockets have been combined for hearing purposes. Let's recognize that we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser in the hearing room. I note for the record that Commissioner Thomas is on annual leave and Commissioner Justin Williams is on military leave. So you're stuck with the four of us. I'm going to recognize our staff counsel, Mr. Russell, to read the docket, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, commissioners and parties. As previously indicated, we're here today for a proceeding in the South Carolina Public Service Authority's application for Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity in docket 2024-61E and Central Electric Power Cooperative Inc.'s application for Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity in docket 2024-63E. As also noted, these matters were previously consolidated for a hearing by Commission Directive dated February 22nd, 2024. I believe all parties participating in the matter are available and the docket is in order. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Sorry. It's one of those mornings. Let's take appearances put for the parties. Who's appearing for the South Carolina Public Service Authority, also known as Santee Cooper?
Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the Commission. I'm Megan Driggers, in-house counsel at Santee Cooper, and with me is Steve Pelcher, Deputy General Counsel of Nuclear and Regulatory at Santee Cooper, and we appreciate the opportunity to be heard today.
Thank you. And who's representing Central Electric Power Cooperative?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Lyle Trawick of Robinson Gray on behalf of Central Electric Power Cooperative.
Thank you. And the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Good morning, Chair Belser, Vice Chair Powers, and members of the Commission. Joshua Alston on behalf of ORS, and with me today I have Ms. Lenise Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get started, are there any preliminary matters that need to be addressed? Hearing none. Council, you know I think you've all been here. You're welcome to stay at the table if you're comfortable being seated to ask questions or present witnesses. Otherwise, go to one of the podiums on either side. I just ask that you speak into a microphone so that we can record this and everyone can hear. So, thank you. With that, if there's no preliminary matters, Mr. Drake, who's going first? Mr. Trawick, you're going first. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, Central calls Mr. Chris Ware to the stand to testify as part of a joint panel with Santee Cooper's witnesses.
Is it a panel? Okay. In
our letter that Ms. Driggers filed with the Commission, I think our intent to streamline things for the Commission would be to
Mr. Ware.
Have Central's witness introduced by counsel for Central first, and then turn it over to Ms. Driggers to introduce Santee Cooper's witnesses, and all three of them be available for questioning from the Commission.
Okay. So is he gonna testify separate and then remain while the others, or are we gonna bring out the whole panel?
He'll remain.
Okay.
If that pleases the Commission.
That's fine. Whatever's easiest for y'all's presentation, I'm fine with. Miss Sally, would you swear the witness, please?
Good morning, Mr. Ware. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is William Christopher Ware. I go by Chris Ware.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Employed by Central Electric Power Cooperative, or Electric Power Cooperative Inc. as the Vice President of Engineering and Engineering Services.
And how long have you been in your current role?
Since August of 2021.
And please describe your responsibilities at Central.
I provide guidance to the Central Electric Board on transmission systems, information and operations technologies. I'm responsible for system planning, transmission line and station design and construction, land acquisition, environmental services, reliability, asset management, and information operations technologies, in support of the Distribution Electric Cooperatives of South Carolina. It is also part of my responsibility to develop and oversee capital, construction budgets, as well as operations and maintenance budgets for the parts of central operations that fall under my authority.
And how long have you worked in the energy industry as an engineer?
Approximately 25 years.
Thank you. Mr. Ware, did you prepare a cause to be prepared 5 pages of testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this matter?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Did you have any changes or corrections to make to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
Yes, on page 5, lines 4 through 6, I stated that the consumer has already paid the cost for pre-construction services and has agreed to pay for phases of the project at the time that it provides the notice to proceed for each phase. I need to update that testimony to clarify that the consumer is now paid for all phases of the project.
Chair Belser, I would ask that Mr. Ware's pre-filed direct testimony as amended from the stand be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Ware's pre-filed direct testimony as amended from the stand will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ware.
Madam Chair, could you
Vice-
repeat the change exactly? Do you know what line it is, or?
Of course.
Lines
Page 5, line 4 through 6, I stated the consumer has already paid the costs for pre-construction services and has agreed to pay for phases of the project at the time it provides the notice to proceed for each phase. And I need to update that testimony to clarify that the consumer is now paid for all phases of the project, so that includes all the construction.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. Mr. Ware, are you familiar with the contents of the application filed in this proceeding?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, does that accurately represent Central's position in this case?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd move Central's application be admitted as a hearing exhibit.
Central Electric Power Cooperative Incorporated's application will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 1 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Mr. Ware, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
The purpose of my testimony is to support Central's application for Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity to construct 2 230 kV lines, that's kilovolts, to connect the Mount Zion substation, which will be built and owned by Santee Cooper, with substations to be built and owned by the consumer of Central Electric Power Cooperative Inc.'s member, Aiken Electric Cooperative Inc. To operate a data center in Aiken County, South Carolina. The 2 230 kilovolt lines are in an industrial park just north of the city of Aiken. The Aiken Electric Cooperative consumer will provide and clear new right-of-way to support the lines. The project will require 2 crossings of Giant Tire Parkway, for which permits will be obtained from the South Carolina Department of Transportation. Right-of-way width is 100 feet minimum for each line for separate routing, but where lines are in parallel, a single 100-foot minimum width right-of-way will be used. The total length of the central lines is approximately 1.5 miles, but the project will not require any right-of-way from any landowner other than the Aiken Electric Cooperative consumer. The Santee Cooper project involves the construction of the Mount Zion substation and 230 kilovolt lines to provide service through the Central Electric 230 kilovolt lines to those substations, and it is more fully described in Santee Cooper's application. Both the Santee Cooper project and the Central project are necessary to provide service to the new Aiken Electric Cooperative consumer. Central and Santee Cooper are cooperating on the planning, permitting, and construction of their respective portions of the overall project. Central has entered into a contract with Santee Cooper for the central portion of the facilities, and the work for both portions of the project is being done by the Burns & McDonnell engineering firm. The need for the project is driven by the demand for service under an agreement for large power electric service entered in September 2023 between Aiken Electric Cooperative and its consumer. Pursuant to the agreement, this consumer plans to construct a data center with a peak demand of up to 200 megawatts and requires Aiken Electric Cooperative and Central to arrange for the construction of facilities necessary to serve the data center. The agreement also provides that the consumer will install, own, operate, and maintain substation facilities necessary to provide service to the data center. The project will provide the connection between the new Santee Cooper Mount Zion substation and the consumer substations to be constructed on its property. The Aiken Electric Cooperative consumer has paid the costs of the project, including the Santee Cooper portion, in advance. As a result, those costs will not be shifted to other members of Aiken Electric Cooperative or Central. This project will benefit the community because the consumer will bring new jobs and a substantial investment. And the consumer has a strong track record of partnering with host communities to provide additional benefits. The size and load factor of the data center will benefit all members of Central, including Aiken Electric Cooperative, by making significant contributions through rates to cover existing fixed cost while directly funding the project to serve the consumer's load. This concludes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Madam Chair, at this time, I'd turn it over to counsel for Santee Cooper to introduce the remaining members of the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Truitt. Ms. Driggers?
And good morning again. Before I present the witnesses, as a preliminary matter, Santee Cooper requests to move into the record as the next hearing exhibit the application and exhibits A through D to the application that Santee Cooper filed with the Commission on February 14th, 2024. And I'll note that Exhibit A to the application was also filed as SK1 to the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Sarah Kent. And there is an errata that was filed May 13th, 2024. And Ms. Kent, I hoped, could provide a foundation for that, and we could admit that as a composite exhibit at that time.
At that time, but right now you're just asking for the main application with the exhibits attached to the application?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We will mark for identification as hearing exhibit 2, Santee Cooper's application with exhibits A through D. That's marked as hearing exhibit 2 and will be admitted into the evidence of this case.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We intend to present our witnesses as a panel with Central's witnesses. At this time, we'd like to call Mr. Christopher Wagner to stand.
Do you just want to go ahead and bring up both of your witnesses?
Yes, ma'am.
How about that?
And Ms. Sarah Kent as well.
Thank you. Ms. Sally, you want to?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Wagner, could you state your name once again for the record?
Christopher Wagner,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Santee Cooper, Director of Transmission Planning, Research and Development.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision 7 pages of direct testimony pre-filed with the Commission on March 26, 2024, and 2 pages of rebuttal testimony filed on April 30th, 2024?
I did.
Do you have any changes to that testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
At this time, I request that the direct and rebuttal testimony of Mr. Wagner, that's pre-filed with the Commission, be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Wagner's pre-filed direct testimony and pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be received into the records as if given from the stand.
And Mr. Wagner, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision 1 exhibit, CW1, as an attachment to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I did.
At this time, I request exhibit CW1 to Mr. Wagner's direct testimony be admitted into the record as hearing exhibit 3.
The exhibit marked CW1, which was attached to Mr. Wagner's pre-filed direct testimony will be marked for identification as hearing Exhibit 3 and received into the evidence of the case.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner, do you have a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimony?
I do.
Could you please provide that at this time?
Sure. Good morning, Chair Belzer, members of the Commission. As noted, I'm Director of Transmission Planning, Research, and Development at Santee Cooper. In this proceeding, I submitted direct and rebuttal testimony. My direct testimony outlines my educational background and my experience at Santee Cooper involving system operations, planning, and my work on national reliability committees and working groups related to reliability. I also summarize my role at Santee Cooper related to oversight of our open access transmission tariff, including transmission service requests, generator interconnections, and provisions of transmission service, along with oversight of research and development activities. My direct testimony is intended to discuss the need for construction of the two new Aiken to Mount Zion 230 kV lines, the Mount Zion switching station, and associated facilities, and to give an overview of the proposed project. The lines will support service to a new industrial consumer of Aiken Electric Cooperative, which is a member cooperative of Central Electric Power Cooperative. Both Santee Cooper and Central have responsibilities associated with the construction of the 230 kV facilities to provide electric service in the quantity and configuration necessary to meet the needs of the consumer. Aiken Electric and their consumer entered into an agreement for large power electric service in September of 2023, wherein the consumer notes the need to construct a data center with a peak demand of up to 200 megawatts. That agreement also provides that the consumer will install, own, operate, and maintain substation facilities necessary to provide service to the data center. The Santee Cooper portion of the project will provide two paths from the 230 kV source at Santee Cooper's Aiken 230-115 kV substation and establish the Mount Zion 230 kV switching station near the consumer's facility. The two new 230 kV lines from the existing Aiken 230-115 kV substation to the new Mount Zion 230 kV switching station will be approximately 16 miles in length and will utilize existing right-of-way via 115 kV transmission line corridors by rebuilding the existing 115 kV lines for 230-115 double circuit construction, along with a parallel single circuit 230 kV line. In addition to the construction of the new 230 kV lines and the new Mount Zion 230 kV switching station, associated substation facilities will be added to the Aiken 230-115 kV substation to include new 230 kV terminals, breakers, protection systems, and other equipment required to properly protect and isolate the new transmission line facilities. The central portion of the project will provide the connection between the new Santee Cooper Mount Zion 230 kV switching station and the consumer's substation facilities to be constructed on its property. The new facilities will provide the additional electrical capacity needed to serve the industry's load demand reliably. Alternative routes were ruled out relatively early in the process. Santee Cooper initially considered 115 kV interconnection options to serve the project, but due to the significant number of facility upgrades required, it was determined that providing service at 230 kV could be implemented earlier and in a more cost-effective manner and would better meet the requirements of the consumer. Alternatives to this area are limited, due to the proximity of transmission sources in relation to the project site. The 230 kV facilities proposed represent the most direct path from the closest source on Santee Cooper's system, capable of serving the needs of the consumer. These facilities maximize the use of existing corridors and minimize impacts to landowners and the environment. The latest estimate to construct the project is $122.8 million. Of that, $113 million is directly assigned to the consumer, and $9.8 million is assigned to Santee Cooper. The consumer is responsible for costs associated with all facilities required to provide service to the site, minus costs associated with certain 115 kV portions of the project which are currently at the end of their useful life. The replacement of these facilities are considered network upgrades for the purpose of this project, and costs associated with these facilities are to be the responsibility of Santee Cooper. My rebuttal testimony is intended to address a recommendation raised by ORS witness Finley Salter related to South Carolina Code annotated 58-33-180A1B. Mr. Salter noted the requirement of that statute, that an applicant demonstrate that no energy efficiency, demand-side management, renewable energy generation, and long-term power supply alternative or combination could satisfy the need in lieu of constructing a major utility facility. My rebuttal testimony affirmed that no energy efficiency measure, demand-side management, renewable energy resource generation, nor long-term power supply alternative would mitigate the constraints that drive the need for this project. On behalf of Santee Cooper, I request the Commission issue a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of the Aiken to Mount Zion 230 kV lines, the Mount Zion 230 kV switching station, and associated facilities. This concludes the summary of my direct and rebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. And next, Santee Cooper calls Ms. Sarah Kent. Ms. Kent, will you restate your name, please?
Sarah Kent.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Burns & McDonnell Engineering Company as a department manager of our Natural and Cultural Resources Group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision 11 pages of direct testimony filed with the Commission on March 26, 2024?
I did.
Do you have any changes to that testimony?
No.
At this time, I request the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Kent be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Kent's pre-filed direct testimony will be admitted into the record as if given orally.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your supervision the exhibit attached to your testimony as SK1?
Yes, I was a contributing author.
Are there any changes to that exhibit?
Yes, after discussions with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, a few modifications were made to the transmission line siting and environmental report to reflect the potential for the state protected species, the southern hognose snake, to occur within the project area. This required a few slight modifications to the report.
And at this time, Santee Cooper moves that the errata filed on May 13th, 2024, styled SK1A, and the exhibit attached to Ms. Kent's testimony as SK1 be a composite exhibit and admitted into the record as hearing exhibit 4.
Ms. Kent's exhibit SK1 that was attached to the pre-filed testimony along with the errata sheet filed with the Commission on May 13th and denoted as exhibit SK1A will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 4 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you. Ms. Kent, do you have a summary of your direct testimony?
I do.
Could you please share that at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the Commission. As noted, I am employed by Burns & McDonnell Engineering Company, Inc. as a department manager of the Natural and Cultural Resources Group within the Environmental Services Global Practice. I have supported Santee Cooper and Central Electric Power Cooperative, Inc. with substation and transmission line projects, including performing and managing environmental and local permitting and civil design. In this proceeding, I submitted direct testimony on behalf of Santee Cooper and Central. I was a contributing author of the transmission line siting and environmental report for the Aiken No. 3 to Mount Zion 230/115 kV transmission line rebuild project, which was included in my testimony as Exhibit SK1. My direct testimony discussed the route for the potential line, the methodology used to evaluate the route, offered an overview of the short and long-term environmental impacts of the project, the impact of the proposed project to rare, threatened, endangered species, wetlands and streams, and summarized cultural resources studies conducted and visual effects of the project. The impacts to the environment, if any, from the construction and operation of the proposed project are anticipated to be limited to the immediate area where new and replacement structures are proposed to be installed. The majority of the project will occur within an existing right-of-way associated with an existing overhead transmission line corridor. The remainder of the construction would occur in an undeveloped Santee Cooper-owned property or newly acquired land within close proximity or adjacent to the existing overhead transmission line corridor. Burns & McDonnell conducted a desktop review of the project area using publicly available resources, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wetland Inventory, the Natural Resources Conservation Service Web Soil Survey for Aiken County, the U.S. Geologic Survey topographic maps and National Hydrography Database, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Informational for Planning and Consultation, or IPAC tool. Burns and McDonnell biologists completed in-person protected species habitat assessments to evaluate the potential for federally protected and state protected species and/or their habitat to occur within the project area. 6 federally protected species and 10 state protected species were identified as having potential to occur. The project area is primarily cleared overhead electrical transmission line corridor, except for the proposed 27.5 acres of new right-of-way for the new Mount Zion switch station and associated feeder lines, and areas around the existing Aiken No. 1 and Aiken No. 3 substations. The proposed 27.5 acres of new right-of-way is predominantly undeveloped wooded land or cleared land adjacent to industrial areas. Based on our desktop review and in-person field surveys, Burns and McDonnell recommended that the project may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect the tricolored bat, with no impact on designated critical habitat or any other federal protected species identified as potentially occurring. Burns and McDonnell recommended that the proposed project would not jeopardize the continued existence of any threatened or endangered species. Regarding state protected species, we recommended that the project may affect but not adversely affect the Raffenest big-eared bat, the spotted turtle. Our determinations for these specific species were based on information reviewed, data and observations collected during in-person surveys, and implementation of species-specific avoidance and minimization measures during project construction that are consistent with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources guidance. We also recommend that no other state protected species would be impacted by the proposed project. Our findings were documented in requests for concurrence letters submitted to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources on February 16, 2024. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife responded on February 23rd, indicating that upon review, there are no known federally protected species within the project boundaries and that the Fish and Wildlife has no objections to the project at this time. The Fish and Wildlife also indicated that with reasonable certainty that the project will not jeopardize the tricolored bat. The South Carolina Department of Natural Resources responded on March 26, 2024, requesting additional information and clarification on a few details associated with the project, including the itemization and implementation of species-specific avoidance and minimization measures during construction, survey methodology utilized during in-person surveys, adding the southern hognose snake to the environmental report as a species the project may affect but is not likely to adversely affect, and requiring submittal of an application for scientific collection and handling permits. Burns and McDonnell responded in a letter dated April 26, 2024, providing requested information. The South Carolina DNR responded on May 1st, 2024, requesting additional information. Yesterday, on May 13th, 2024, an errata was filed on the dockets that includes updates to the environmental report and natural resources report. These updates address potentially suitable habitat within the project area for the southern hognose snake. The latest correspondence with the DNR was also filed, within which we provide updated construction best management practices, or BMPs, including the inclusion of native seed mixes during its restoration. Wetlands and water delineations were conducted by Burns and McDonnell. A total of 6 streams and 26 wetlands totaling approximately 25 acres were delineated for the project. No tidal canal or tidal wetland crossings are proposed. Within the identified wetland areas, clearing and construction activities will involve the use of high flotation, low pressure equipment, or temporary matting to minimize ground disturbance. Best management practices will be implemented as required by the project's stormwater pollution prevention plan and implemented by construction contractors prior to construction. These BMPs may include temporary matting, silt fencing, sediment tubes, vegetative buffers, and single-lane travel paths. No impairment of water flow is expected. The intent is to restore ruts and depressions as soon as possible. No permanent impacts to wetlands or streams are proposed, and avoidance and minimization efforts to wetlands or streams have been implemented to the maximum extent practicable. Burns and McDonnell conducted a Phase 1 cultural resources survey of the proposed project, and Burns and McDonnell determined that the project was unlikely to have any direct or indirect adverse effects to significant archaeological resources or historic structures. Our findings were submitted to the South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, on February 22, 2024, and on March 14, 2024. The SHPO responded in a letter dated April 12, 2024, requesting additional information in order to complete their review. As of the date of this testimony, Burns & McDonnell is conducting additional archaeological and architectural surveys and will submit a revised report to the SHPO with the information requested in order to complete their review. Burns & McDonnell anticipates that the additional survey efforts will support our findings that the project is unlikely to have any direct or indirect adverse effects to significant archaeological resources or historic structures. The project will have low overall visual effects with the exception of a few minimal new right-of-way clearing because the majority of the construction will be completed within existing Santee Cooper right-of-way and thus have no significant visual modifications. The project will primarily share existing right-of-way and be parallel or adjacent to existing lines and facilities, and the route traverses undeveloped land where trees will provide screening. As stated in my direct testimony, the impact of the proposed line and associated facilities upon the environment is justified considering available technology and the nature and economics of alternatives. As this route minimizes the effects to environment, land use, cultural resources, and aesthetics. In my professional judgment, Santee Cooper and Central Electric Power Cooperative, Inc.'s decision to use the proposed route was proper. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Chair Belzer and members of the commission, Mr. Ware, Mr. Wagner, and Ms. Kent are now available for cross-examination and questions from the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Driggers. Commissioners, questions for the witnesses? Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Morning.
I believe, Mr. Wagner, most of these, if not all, are for you for now. I need assistance here.
Yeah, right there with you.
On page 5 of the application, I think it's paragraph 4, there's a 27.5 reference. Can I assume that that's acres? It's page 5, I think paragraph 4. I think where it references additional.
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
acres. Yes, sir.
I thought that. I was. On page 6 of your direct testimony, lines 5 through 6, you talk about alternatives in this area. Does this mean industrial and or other growth in this area is limited because of the lack of transmission resources in that area?
I'd say it depends. So time frame for development and costs associated with that development could impact a decision there, certainly. But as you know, other factors may make that area more desirable. And you know, to the extent we build more facilities in the area like this, then there's more opportunity for development as well.
I guess what I was trying to understand, and maybe you just answered it and I just didn't follow it well, is it limited because of the lack of transmission or supply? If growth, a substantial growth, industrial growth is to occur?
We can build what we need to build to the area to allow for the growth. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take and how much money is it going to cost. So it's a business decision at that point, right? Is that area an area that has other attributes that may be desirable, and that the costs associated with getting transmission service to it can be overcome because of other attributes. So it's always a balance when it comes to industrial development. Hope that helps answer your question.
All right, will this new transmission line meet the needs of the data center and provide for future growth and development?
So it sort of, so it is directly for the industry that is locating here. It won't serve any other customers. But what it does is it, by not interconnecting it to the 115, it preserves that capacity that is there on the 115 system for other systems, or for other industry, sorry.
To your knowledge, is there any plans to, does this data center have any plans to expand it, to your knowledge, or is this a one-time thing?
This is phase one. They had looked at a phase two of the project, but there's uncertainty on whether that's going to proceed.
And this probably is for both of you, gentlemen. In your experience, how often do customers request a double feed line for service? Is that normal, abnormal, or?
It is normal depending on the industry. So an industry like a data center is going to almost always want at least redundant service. So other industries will as well. Just depends on how critical their process is and how sensitive they are to interruptions.
Is that ever compared to, I guess, a standby generation in lieu of a redundant feed, or is it just boil down to the economics of it?
So it boils down to the economics, but it also depends on the process that the industry has in place and how critical interruptions are. Some of them will have redundant transmission service and generation backup. It just depends on the industry and how critical that facility is to their overall business.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Just can't think of nothing right now, Ms. Kent, but thank you. Thank you all.
Commissioners? Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer, and good morning. Good to see you all and hear what's happening and what some of the options are that are out there. I have a really basic question, and it could be a stupid one, but it has to do with the application title that we have put on these. They both include requests to proceed with initial clearing. That isn't anything I've heard you all talk about today. It may be moot because of the timing, but I'd like for you to talk about it a little bit, just because there may be it's just a good opportunity to learn. And everybody's looking at you, Ms. Kent.
Yes. Since we have two bat species that could be affected by the project, we are restricted to specific time of year clearing windows. So we are with the DNR and with the Fish and Wildlife for both the tricolor bat and for the Raffinus big-eared bat, we're limited to starting clearing in August to December. So the request to do initial clearing is negated by the fact that we are abiding by these time of year restrictions, and we'll begin clearing in August.
And it's April now, and so you're anticipating that you'll be able to start at the appropriate time to meet those needs.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it's May.
Oh, right.
It is May.
Thank you.
Although I'm having trouble with the days and dates too, believe me.
When, Ms. Kent, while we're talking, you
Mhm.
talked about the SHPO,
Yes,
kind
ma'am.
of waiting that they had asked for additional information and that you don't anticipate that's a problem. When that letter comes, will that be filed in this docket even if we've already made a decision?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Generally, what kind of interest is there? I heard archaeological.
Yes. Primarily archaeological. They asked, there was several sites within the project area 8 of them, they requested additional information, mostly to understand the full site boundary of these sites and to characterize the type of site it is. Several of them have not been potentially eligible or listed as potentially eligible, so it's more just informational. But Santee, Cooper, and Central are committed to putting exclusionary fencing around all of the cultural sites, archaeological sites, and also no pole structures are being placed within these sites. So impacts are going to be avoided.
Commissioner, can I follow up on that?
Yes.
Because I had a question about that too, about can we move forward with a decision while we're still waiting on something from the state, what is it, Historic Preservation Office?
Archives and History, since you're correcting me.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, I did noted on page 420 that there was still information coming from South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office. Are you testifying today, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my question is that the information that you're still expecting regarding cultural sites doesn't impact what is the requested route or plans?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that a fair assessment from what you just said?
Yes, ma'am. Let me see if I can answer your question. So yes, as I stated, we're putting exclusionary fencing around the cultural sites, and none of the pole structures are going to be placed within the sites. So we're not anticipating direct impact to any of these sites, regardless of their eligibility for the National Historic Preservation Act. So again, the SHPO just requested some additional information from our previous report, additional shovel tests, additional information, additional site boundaries, as not all of these have been further or fully investigated in the past.
And that's 8
Yes, ma'am.
sites?
Yes, ma'am.
Any idea when you may receive further word from?
Yes, actually, we're on track to submit our revised report to them, to the SHPO by the end of this month. They did say that since we've already submitted a report, that they would provide a response, and we anticipate a concurrence within 30 days, if not sooner.
By the end of June?
Yeah, or mid-June is probably more likely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for letting me go.
Of course. This is switching gears a little bit, but I think this is for Ms. Kent. I picked up on this language in Mr. Salter's testimony, but there was discussion about a low-quality wetland that would need that functions as a retention pond that will need to be filled. Will that retention element be replaced somewhere? Could you talk some more about that circumstance?
Yes, ma'am. That is for the Aiken #1 expansion, substation expansion. We are implementing, we have submitted our application to the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control for the construction, stormwater pollution prevention plan and notice of intent. Aiken County is also performing an MS4 review of our plans and has provided comments on our design for that substation. We do have other stormwater measures in place to replace that, to answer your question, but we are working through that permitting process right now with the county. And then once they provide their approval, then DHEC would then issue our general construction permit for the project.
Okay. I think I have other questions, but so I'm going to thank you and see if there's another minute for me to jump in after someone else has asked other questions. Thank you.
Vice Chair Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to all of you. Ms. Kent, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit about your company. I'm very curious about what your company does, where you're from, and all that sort of thing.
So I'm from our Atlanta office. Our company is headquartered out of Kansas City. We are about 10,000 employees. We primarily focus on engineering detailed design. We do have an environmental division that does permitting as well. And we also do construction management.
Okay. And I'll follow up as far as Commissioner Williams with what might be a stupid question. Do you actually get out and walk any of these properties, or how do you make your determination?
Oh, yes, sir. For environmental, we have biologists that go out and do, and archaeologists that go out and do field surveys throughout the entire project area. Yes.
Okay, because I noticed there were like 6 streams and 20-something
Wetlands, yes, sir.
wetlands and all. And I know I was on our state coastal council for years, and I know it's different in the coastal counties than it is here. But I still have a real concern about, well, not your contract, but when does your job end? Do you have any obligation to follow up and make any sort of final report when the project's completed, or would anybody do that?
Yes, sir. What the notice to terminate will be filed with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, and also will be notified to the Army Corps of Engineers when the project is complete.
Okay. It would not be filed with us. We won't know when it's done, or through anything you file.
I don't believe so, no, sir.
Okay. There seems to be some question about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and protective measures they have. Is there a reason that those aren't considered or not adopted by Santee Cooper or the co-ops in this?
Well, we have the only federally protected species with the Fish and Wildlife to occur in the project area is the tricolor bat, and we have concluded consultation with Fish and Wildlife for this project. They determined that there was no impact to the bat for this project, or not likely to adversely affect.
Are there any residential homes in this area, or the property going to have to deal with homeowners?
Yes, sir. We do. We notified over 200 landowners that are affected by the property, by the project. And but overall, it is a pretty moderate to low density developed area.
Okay. Yeah, one more for you on here. Figure out how to work it.
Vice Chair Powers, I could jump in if you need more time.
I got it, just a minute. The thing about the turtles, I think you found in your final report that there wasn't a question about the turtles being a problem.
Yeah, so that's with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. We have 4 state protected species with potential to occur in the project. One is the raffinese big-eared bat. There is the spotted turtle. There is the gopher tortoise, and there is the southern hognose snake. So as I've mentioned, Santee Cooper and Central are committed to the time of year restrictions to minimize impacts to the 2 bat species. We're also working with the Department of Natural Resources to install exclusionary fencing for the turtles and the snake as well. And then we're working with DNR to obtain collection and handling permits should any of these species be encountered during construction, which includes also having qualified biologists locate and handle and relocate these species out of the construction area.
I can't help but think of years ago, I had a house in the country and built a pond, and my dad used to fuss that the turtles were eating the fish, and that was kind of a different way of looking at it. Thank you very much. Could I move to Mr. Wagner?
Yes, sir.
Or Mr. Ware on this. Can this project, I think Commissioner earlier raised the question about if there's an expansion thing. Is there a way to adopt or adapt if there is an expansion of this particular consumer? And if there is, would they be responsible under your agreements to pay for it?
So the facilities that we're proposing here would be able to handle some expansion at the facility. It depends on obviously how large the expansion is. And any additional facilities associated with directly supplying the facility, the consumer here.
So the 230 line is a gracious plenty at this point, you think?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is, I'm not familiar with the area at all. This is an industrial development part that many cities have?
Is it a park? Certainly an industrial area, but I don't know that it's an official industrial park.
With this expansion that you're doing, and this transmission that you're doing, will it be able to benefit, other industries should they move into this park or into this area? Or would you have to have a different substation, or why aren't you using the substation that you have now?
Right, so the facilities that we're building, it would depend on the scenario as to whether they could benefit another industry. The issue we have today, to your question about why are we building these facilities now, the facilities that are in the area are 115 kV facilities, are older, not older, but smaller conductor, operated at a lower voltage, so they're not capable of providing the service that this industry needs. So we're having to build these facilities from the closest source that is capable of providing that service. That's the intent.
I think what I'm trying to understand is that if the substation is going to be on their property and there's more development in that area, do they become a utility? And
oh, absolutely.
How does that work?
So Santee Cooper and Central, or through the cooperative, through Central and Santee Cooper, would serve and construct facilities to build or to serve any future industry in the area. If another industry were to locate there, then like I said, it would depend on the scenario, how large their load is, what their reliability requirements, how it impacts the requirements of the existing industry that's there, as to whether they could utilize the facilities that are there that we're building now.
Is anything in your agreement or not in your agreement that this particular consumer has any control over whether or not another data center is located in Aiken County or in the Aiken area?
I'm not aware of anything in our agreements that prohibit the use of the facilities.
And Mr. Ware, I wanted to ask you a little bit about this particular industry, this data center. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Who owns it and how many people it's going to employ? Or
Is that confidential?
It is, Madam Chair.
It is.
So we would need to be in a closed session to further discuss that.
I'll withdraw that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just withdraw it. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Wagner and Mr. Ware, I just want to ask, well, Mr. Wagner, I think in Santee Cooper's application, there's some rights of way that need to be acquired. Have discussions on those rights of way have those started, or where are they?
Yes, they have. So we've reached out to Sarah, help me here. It was
Yeah, we have contacted over 200 landowners initially, as I said, but we will be, or Santee Cooper will be acquiring 4 new parcels for new right-of-way. And 2 of the 4 have been acquired thus far, with the remaining 2 on track to be acquired by August of this year.
And Mr. Ware, there was some crossings of Parkway, and I think you have to work with Department of Transportation. Have those?
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
going from whose testimony this stuff was in, so
Yeah.
I know. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
so Burns and McDonnell is supporting the permitting efforts for this project, and we have submitted all the applications to the DOT in Aiken County for road crossings.
And am I correct from reading, and let me just tell you, that is some scintillating reading in that thick application. Is that, this was the most feasible route, the easiest, most direct route for these lines?
It is. It's essentially a straight shot from our 230 kV station to the site, following, actually utilizing existing corridor. So the least land impact and the most direct route to the site.
And with regard to ORS's testimony and your rebuttal, Mr. Wagner. Can you expand a little bit on why DSM, EE, renewable energy resources, and other mechanisms? Let's see what else. And other available power sources are not sufficient here.
Sure. So,
I just want to make the record complete.
Absolutely. So some of it would have to do with the consumer's requirements, right? The consumer requires redundant, high reliability service. A purchase power agreement wouldn't really work. I mean, you could have a purchase power agreement to support this load, but you'd still have to get it there, right? So the issue is with how do we get the energy from a source to this facility? The Aiken 3 substation is the closest facility that is large enough to support the load of this consumer at the reliability that they're requiring. Renewable, so that kind of also rules out any energy efficiency, demand side management stuff, because that would be back on the system and it wouldn't pertain to the actual transmission getting to the facility. And then renewable type of installation, I mean, you'd have to have a very large area, directly supplying this facility or somewhere else on the system supplying that energy, and you've still got to get it there. And so the portion that we're working with is the transmission component with how do we get that energy from the system or from where it's being produced to the facility, and there's really no feasible option to employ one of those other mechanisms to get to forego the transmission to the facility.
There's no the transmission getting there now is just not sufficient.
It's just not sufficient. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Commissioners, any further questions?
Chair Belser, I do have one further
Commissioner
question.
Carolee Williams.
Thank you. And this is kind of also for the record. Is there any kind of subsidization that's happened, that you anticipate happening from consumers to this development in terms of cost and who's paying for it?
No, all the costs were prepaid for the transmission upgrades. We don't expect any of those costs to go to anyone else.
And from the generation side, that's more of a pay-as-you-go, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We have the generation to serve the load that's been requested.
And the customer will be paying for it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the 9.8 million that Santee Cooper is paying for, that's for end of life. Is that directly for items that were at their end of life anyway?
Correct. So there's a section of 115 kV line in the path that will be reconstructed.
Mm-hmm.
It's old. It really is at the end of its useful life.
How old? Out of curiosity, roughly.
I don't know exactly. It's
10, 20,
older.
30?
It's probably,
50 or more?
I would say it's beyond 30 years, definitely. Okay. I just don't remember the date specifically, so I don't want to answer it
Just
exactly.
order of magnitude
right.
is all I was after.
And so it's wood poles, it's older conductor, it's and so and it uses older construction and design techniques. So the new facilities are replacing those facilities was going to happen at some point in the near future. So that's this was a catalyst to do it, and as part of a larger project. There's benefit to the customers in the area, which is why it's considered a network upgrade in this case and socialized.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thanks for being here. No further questions.
Ms. Driggers or Mr. Trewick, any redirect?
None from Central, Madam Chair.
No, ma'am, none.
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry.
Just for purposes of the record, there's no cross-examination.
I just realized that I failed to reach out to you. I apologize, ORS.
No problem. Just wanted for the record.
Thank you. I'm not on my game this morning. I apologize. But thanks. No redirect? Okay,
No,
thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Certainly appreciate you being here. You may stand down. Anything further from Santee Cooper or Central?
Yes, ma'am. One matter, Ms. Kent already spoke to it, but we'd like to withdraw the request to begin initial clearing. As Ms. Kent explained, there's no longer a need to start initial clearing because that can't begin until that August window.
Thank you.
Yes,
We will
ma'am.
note that. The request in both applications?
We would join in that request.
Okay. In both applications, to withdraw the request to proceed with initial clearing is withdrawn. Where are we? And that's it from the applicants.
Central rests.
Mr. Alston or Ms. Mitchell for ORS?
Yes, Chair. ORS would call James Findley Salter to the stand.
Sir, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Salter, could you please state your name for the record?
Finley Salter.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the state of South Carolina as the Deputy Director of Energy Planning and Emerging Technology for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared pre-filed direct testimony consisting of 13 pages on April 16th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you the same questions today as posed in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, ORS would request that the pre-filed direct testimony of James Findley Salter be entered into the record of this case as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Salter will be received into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Salter, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please provide that summary now?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My testimony provides the result of ORS's review of the application of Santee Cooper for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity to construct, operate, and proceed with initial land clearing of the Aiken number 3 to Mount Zion number 1 and number 2, 230 kilovolt transmission lines and associated facilities in Aiken County. Additionally, my testimony provides the results of ORS's review of the related application of Central for a certificate to construct, operate, and proceed with initial land clearing of 2 radial single-circuit 230 kV transmission lines from the proposed Santee Cooper Mount Zion 230 kV switching station to 2 future customer substations at the Sage Mill Industrial Park in Aiken County. According to the applications, both projects are necessary to provide service to a new customer of Aiken Electric Cooperative, a member of Central. The proposed Santee Cooper Aiken to Mount Zion transmission lines would extend approximately 16.2 miles on existing rights-of-way between the proposed Mount Zion switching station and the existing Aiken number 3 substation. Associated facilities include construction of the Mount Zion switching station, expansion of Aiken number 3 substation, and interior modifications of the Aiken number 1 substation. The proposed Central project includes 2 radial single-circuit 230 kV transmission lines extending approximately 1.5 miles between the proposed Mount Zion switching station and 2 future substations owned and operated by the customer. The proposed facilities are driven by the capacity and reliability requirements of a new large customer of Aiken Electric Cooperative, and both projects are necessary to provide the service to the customer. ORS's review concluded the proposed facilities will result in minimal impact to the environment, will serve the interest of system, economy, and reliability, and will support the company's ability to provide reliable electric service to the new customer. This concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. Madam Chair, Mr. Salter is available for cross-examination and commission questions.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Thank you.
Questions from Santee Cooper?
No, ma'am.
Questions from Central?
No, ma'am.
Commissioners, questions for the witness? Commissioner Caston?
I have one. Thank you, Madam
Morning.
Chair. Good morning, Mr. Salter. Really, I have just one question. And I guess relative to, I guess in response to Mr. Wagner's question from Chair Belcher relative to the other alternatives and such, and Mr. Wagner's rebuttal testimony, and I was sitting here trying to think how to ask this without reading all this stuff, and I couldn't come up with it. So, considering Mr. Wagner's rebuttal testimony relative to that, in his testimony, he says for the project that is the subject of this application, energy efficiency measures, demand-side management, renewable energy resource generation, available long-term power supply alternatives, or any combination thereof would not satisfy the stated need in lieu of constructing the major utility facility. This conclusion is based upon my review and thorough understanding of the proposed project and associated reliability requirements of the customer, as well as understanding that the cited alternatives to be considered in South Carolina Code 5833-180A-1B are better suited for new generation project rather than transmission project. All that said, does ORS agree with this rebuttal comments and clarification from witness Wagner?
Yes, sir. And my recommendation was rooted to ensure that all the information that required by the statute was completely incorporated into the record.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to make sure of too. Well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Mr. Salter.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Salter. How are you?
Good morning.
On page 8 of your testimony, your pre-file testimony, you there?
Yes, I'm
Oh,
there.
That was a good guess. On line 17, well, it starts on 16. The study indicated the need to clear and grub 26.46 acres. What is grub?
Well, my understanding of grubbing is when you're clearing, you're generally clearing, you're timbering the land. When you're grubbing, it might just be undergrowth that you're basically taking a large mower to and mowing it down. So it's short of timbering.
Just not familiar with that term, so I was curious. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for the witness?
Chair Belzer?
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
In your opinion, did the companies make every reasonable effort to contact the community that's going to be impacted by the transmission project?
We did ask Discovery relative to the communication that occurred. We reviewed the letters that went out to the community, to the impacted landowners, and that seemed adequate. It seemed appropriate to us.
Okay. Are you aware of any future expansion that's being talked about that might evolve from this?
I am not. That was the first I'd heard about this morning.
And are there any concerns for the community about supplying power to a customer with this large a demand?
I'm not aware of any concerns.
And how were the applicants in terms of responding to discovery requests from ORS?
The applicants were responsive to all our requests. Appreciate the responsiveness.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything further? Mr. Austin, any redirect?
No, Madam Chair, that concludes our case.
I did ask about Cross, did I not? Okay. Mr. Salter, thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate your testimony. You may stand down.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes our case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Anything further from any party?
Nothing from
I
Central,
have,
Madam
I
Chair.
have a question with regard to information that still need to come in. Can we proceed with the ruling until we receive that?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that you can proceed with the certificate for both Central and Santee Cooper. What Burns McDonnell has put in place is protective measures, so nothing's affected until they get that official concurrence from SHPO. And these are the final steps of that concurrence, and we believe that you can go ahead with the certificate of public convenience and necessity that's forthcoming, and we can file it as an informational filing as soon as it comes in, the final letter from SHPO.
Central agree?
We concur.
ORS agree?
We have no position on this.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask that y'all get with our council about a date for proposed orders. I imagine there'll be a joint proposed order from the applicants.
We're going to have two separate but complementary
Okay.
orders.
That's what I wasn't sure about, but we'll go forward with that. Okay. If there's nothing further from any of the parties, we will close this proceeding, and notify you of our decision at upcoming commission business meeting. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.